Do I need a mic? Thank you. First of all, let me thank you all for inviting me and a couple of special guests who came, I know, because I was coming here. But first I want to acknowledge Bunny Welsh, our long-term sheriff from Chester County. Bunny, good to see you. And one of my former staffers and her family came from over in Berwyn, H Realtor, Dana. Would you say hello? It used to be Caterson, now it's Danowitz and her family. And a number of others who I saw out in the hallway. Thank you for coming. I don't do this often. It's the first time I've done a town hall meeting. I don't take any money. Nobody pays me. I don't get reimbursed for expenses, and I don't ask you for donations. I do this because it is a part of who I am. I grew up in Marcus Hook, the youngest of 9 kids. Neither parent went to high school, but they were the 2 smartest people I met in my life. They had good morals. My mother was very active in the church, marched us all to church every Sunday morning. My father was active in the fire company. I became a firefighter when I was old enough, became president, chief, went back to school after getting my bachelor's degree at Westchester in education, and got a second degree in fire protection. I ran the county fire training program in Delaware County as a volunteer. Nobody paid me. I worked with Chester County's firefighters, the Malvern Fire Company. I've been in probably 25 times. I know them very well. So I spent a lot of my time before politics with the fire service. You might wonder, why is he wearing that coat? Because this coat was given to me by the chief of rescue at 9/11, Ray Downey, who was my friend. Ray Downey died at 9/11. The story of 9/11 doesn't begin on 9/11. And I wasn't there just at 9/11, which I was. Because in Congress, when I got down to Washington after serving as mayor of Marcus Hook for 5 years, and then as the member of the Delaware County Council and chairman for 5 years, where I first met Bunny, I went to Congress representing Delaware, a slice of Chester County, and a slice of Montgomery County and Southwest Philadelphia. And what I had that no one else had in Congress, I didn't have wealth, but I was a firefighter. No one else had that capability. So here I am with Jim Bunning, the great all-star pitcher from the Phillies, Tom McMillan, the great basketball player, Joe Kennedy, the Kennedy family. But I had something none of them had. I knew all the firefighters in the country, and they knew me. And I knew that if I organized them, I could accomplish anything. So my first term, I organized the firefighters in America. My staff laughed at me, not Dana. She didn't laugh. But my staff in Washington laughed. They said, "Are you kidding me?" I said, "You don't understand the power in America. You don't get it." I said the same thing last year when I gave the keynote speech to the California fire chiefs in LA. 800 of them. I said to them, stop sucking up the political parties. The Democrat Party at best is 45%, the Republican Party 45%. And they fight for the other to get the majority. Police are maybe 50% supported. Half the country wants to defund the police. I don't. I'm a strong supporter of the police. The military is about the same. In every poll, in every state in America, firefighters and EMS are 98% supported. 98% supported. There is no town that wants to defund the fire department. And you know what, folks? There are 55,000 fire stations in America. You've got almost 70 in Chester County. And the bulk of them are volunteer. They don't carry signs out picketing. They do what they do because they love their communities. And across America, I said, if I can organize them, I can accomplish anything I want in Congress. And I did. I organized the fire caucus. And that caucus very quickly in 1 year became the largest in the Congress. And it remains today the largest in the Congress with 370 members. Everybody wanted to join my caucus. Joe Biden, John McCain, Al Gore, they all became co-chairs. And it was bipartisan. Because I wanted to support the men and women who protect our towns. Because they're not just firefighters. They're the people that make America great. Think of your hometown. They're the people that rescue the kids when they're lost and organize the search parties. You got a cat stuck in a tree or a cell that's flooded needs pumping out, they do that work. You organize the parades. It's the hall where the Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts meet. It's the hall you rent when you want to have a wedding reception. They're the backbone of the community, in every community. And if you have them on your side, you've got the most powerful political force in America. And so for the 20 years I served in Congress, I served as a point person of the Firefighters of America. I've been in all 50 states. The book I wrote in 2018 will be released as a Hollywood movie next year. It's called Firefight. I'm not taking a dime of money from the film. We're letting the film be released to the fire departments. They show it in their stations and they keep all the money. And then once after it's been shown for 2 months in the local fire stations, they raise money from it. Then it goes on to one of the big national networks to make money for the firefighters. The goal is to help the firefighters of America. I came out with a firefighters agenda 2 years ago with 8 task forces to help them, which I proposed to Joe Biden. He was out of it, but I know him very well when he was in Congress. He actually traveled me on foreign policy trips that I'll get to in a moment. And I briefed Susie Wiles last fall, before Donald Trump won. Unfortunately, we couldn't put on the presentation I wanted, but I'm working on that right now. I'm going to get funded with private money, not public money, $1 billion worth of initiatives for firefighters in America. $1 billion. It's going to shake the country, and it's going to show the firefighters that we appreciate the work they're doing. That's my primary mission now, and I don't get paid for it. I do it because it's who I am, and it's a legacy I want to leave based on what my father and my brothers taught me. Now, how does 9/11 come in? As the leader of the firefighters in Congress, I went to every disaster the day after it occurred. I was at Hurricane Katrina the day after the storm hit New Orleans. I was at Hurricane Andrew down in Miami and spent 3 days in Tent City in a small town down there. The whole southern part of Miami Metro-Dade County was devastated. I was at the wildland fires in California, up in Montana, Oregon. I was at the Loma Prieta earthquake. I was at the Midwestern floods, the Murrah building bombing in Oklahoma City. And I went to the World Trade Center in 1993. See, the first bombing wasn't 9/11. The World Trade Center was bombed in 1993. And because I had been working with the fire department, the fire commissioner, Howard Safer, called me and said, Congressman, would you come up and meet with our leaders to help us understand what we could do differently to avoid this happening again? 1993. I went up to the World Trade Center. I spent the day at Ground Zero. There were no TV cameras there then because there were only a few deaths. It wasn't the big 9/11 debacle. ATF, the FBI, and DEA took me through the building, and I met a young fire officer who was then a battalion chief. He would become the chief of all rescue for New York City, the man who gave me this jacket, Chief Ray Downey, probably the most well-known hero in the fire department of New York. And Ray was a former Marine, 5 kids, really dedicated American hero. And Ray said, Congressman, we need your help. We can't handle these kinds of incidents. We had no idea this attack was going to occur. The federal government's got to do more to let us understand what's occurring and what might occur so we can handle it when it happens. We don't have that capability. I said, Ray, I understand. He said, look, I was in the Marine Corps. The military needs to understand they need to take a role here. I said, okay, Ray, I get you. So Ray and I became best friends. That night after I left New York, I went back to my office in the Rayburn building, and I was doing work. It was around 11 o'clock, and the phone rang. And I picked it up and answered the phone, and the person on the other end said, is this Congressman Curt Weldon? And I said, yes. Who's this? And he said, it's Mario Cuomo. I said, yeah, I'm howdy doody. He said, no, this is Mario Cuomo. He said, I'm sitting in my office, Congressman, in Albany, and I have C-SPAN on. I just watched your special order where you talked about spending the day at the World Trade Center with our fire department, and I want to thank you. I want to thank you for caring and coming up to spend time with our people to let us understand what we can do better. Now we can deal with another potential attack like the one that occurred. I said, Governor, my commitment is to the men and women that serve in your department, and I'll do whatever's necessary. From that day on, I wrote the legislation to create the Gilmore Commission. You've probably never heard of the Gilmore Commission. The Gilmore Commission was created by the Congress. My legislation, chaired by Virginia Governor Jim Gilmore. The Gilmore Commission issued 5 reports before 9/11. 5 reports. The federal government didn't pay attention. Ray Downey was on the Gilmore Commission. The lead recommendation of the Gilmore Commission was one that I pushed on them, and that was to pull together all of our military intelligence so that we could understand the emerging threats that were about to occur. Now, why did I know that? Because in the 1990s, I was rising in rank on the House Armed Services Committee. I was the vice chairman of the full committee, 60 members, and I was the chairman of the Research and Development Subcommittee. That subcommittee oversees $180 billion a year of your money on research, black programs, hidden programs, and public programs in technology. I was funding it all. I knew it all. In the 1990s, the services were standing up information dominance centers. The Air Force, the Navy, and the Army each had their own, because they knew the threat in the 21st century wasn't going to be tanks and planes. It was going to be cybersecurity. It was going to be attacks on our information systems. So in the 90s, I was the lead in the Congress funding the programs to defend against that. The Army's program was at Fort Belvoir. Fort Belvoir is 20 minutes from the Capitol. The Navy was out in California at San Diego. The Air Force program was in Ohio. So I would go down to Fort Belvoir on a regular basis and meet with the Army intelligence officers to have them brief me. I didn't bother getting ready into the program. I could have, because I had top clearances. I didn't need that. But I was impressed with what I saw. They were pulling together classified and unclassified systems of intelligence to let us understand what threats might be emerging in the future. And I said, boy, this is amazing. They said, Congressman, this is how we're going to be able to defeat the enemy in the 21st century. I said, well, wait a minute. This is what we didn't have up in New York in 1993. And they said, yeah, you're right. So in 1999, 2 years before 9/11, I went to my friends in the intel community that I could trust. And I could not trust the leadership of the CIA. And I'll talk about that in a moment. I could not trust them. And there are good people in the agency, but there are scum in the agency. Only driven by money. Yes.
You're a fireman expert, okay? I have a question for you regarding 911. Not about taxes, not about anything else. I came here tonight to talk about, I want to hear what people said about 911. On page 310 of the only official document we have, okay? Page 310. These firemen are not volunteers. These are paid firemen. They're under orders. They're under command, okay? They were given a direct order to evacuate the towers. And I don't want to use any foul language, but the fireman said, one guy yells into his radio, we're not fucking coming out. Now, I would say that fireman and the rest of them caused the death of 340.
Well, I don't agree with you, but anyway.
Well, they were told to leave and they didn't.
No, that's not true. But anyway, let me finish my story. Okay. But I've interviewed hundreds of firefighters.
I'm just telling you what the 911.
And I'm telling you, the 9/11 Commission report is a bunch of garbage.
I heard
that report's a bunch of garbage. Let me finish. So what happened? So the Army Intelligence Unit was creating a fusion capability of intel systems. And I said to them, can we put together a system that brings all the classified capabilities into one? And they said, yeah, we can do that. They designed a program called the NOAA, National Operation Analysis Hub, policymaker and warfighters tool to deal with emerging transnational terrorist threats. On November the 4th of 1999, with Deputy Secretary of Defense John Hamre, a Democrat, at his suggestion, I hosted a meeting in my office with him, the Deputy Director of the CIA, and the Deputy Director of the FBI. And I said, the Army's got this program working at Fort Belvoir that is what we need to prevent another attack like the one at 93, and other attacks like the attack on the USS Cole. And John Hamre said, we need this. And I said, I'll get it funded. And the FBI said, we'll support it. And the CIA said, we don't want it, and we won't support it. For 2 years, I put language in the defense bill mandating that we establish a fusion center of the 33 classified systems the federal government operates. The federal government controls 33 classified systems with your money in 33 agencies that provide raw data. Before 9/11, it wasn't coordinated. This plan would have done that. In 1999 and in 2000, that opportunity, when I exposed it on 9/11, Louis Freeh, the FBI director, had been, the previous director said, could have prevented 9/11 from happening. When I was so incensed with the CIA when they blocked the creation of the Fusion Center, that on 9/11 I got 4 frantic calls. The Capitol was under attack. The planes had hit the Trade Center buildings in New York. There was a plane that was coming for Washington. We didn't know whether it was coming to the Capitol or the Pentagon. We weren't sure. And these 4 military intelligence officers from Fort Belvoir said, "Mr. Chairman, we have to see you right away." I said, "We're under attack now. They're evacuating all the office buildings. We have to see you." So I met with them one at a time. An Army Lieutenant Colonel, career spy, Tony Schaefer. An Air Force career intelligence officer and analyst, Dr. Eileen Pricer. A Navy Annapolis graduate, Navy commander of several ships, Scott Philpott. And the leader of the Army's Land Information Warfare Assessment Center. Each of them came into me separately and said, "We identified the New York cell of Al-Qaeda and Muhammad Atta a year before 9/11. There's the chart. That chart wasn't developed after 9/11. The team at the Army's Leva facility, working on your behalf, established by General Hugh Shelton, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, as a special task force, these 20 military officers that I was funding at a highly classified level called Able Danger, which I then found out about, had identified every cell of Al-Qaeda in the world, by name, and photograph. And in addition, these 5 pink cells were the lead cells, one of which is in New York. And they told me on 9/11, they had identified Muhammad Atta as a member of the New York cell of Al-Qaeda a year before the attack. And they told me they tried to transfer the information to the Justice Department 3 times and were blocked. None of that's in the 9/11 Commission report. None of it. The 9/11 Commission report is a piece of trash. Zelikow was put in place. Let me finish my speech, and then you can talk. I don't need to have an advertisement. No, let me try. Hold on. First of all, I'll take a polygraph for what I say. You don't have the first information. I do. You want to sell a book or something, go sell it. My stuff's first-hand information. I'll take a pot. I was there. You weren't there. I had top secret clearance.
So did the President of the United States.
Why don't you wait and listen? Who is this guy? I'm trying to give you the experience that I had as your representative in Congress, based on what I saw and what I knew. The Bush administration didn't want a commission. The Clinton administration didn't want a commission. They didn't want to know what happened. We in the Congress forced the commission. The commission was established. Now I'm a Republican. The Bush administration put Zelikow in charge of the commission. Do you know why they picked Zelikow? Does anyone know why? Do you know why?
Doesn't enter into it.
Do you know why?
Don't yell at me.
Because Zelikow was Condoleezza Rice's best friend. And today's her business partner. They put Zelikow in to run the commission. The Democrats put Jamie Grolick in on the commission. The 2 of them ran the commission. Jamie Grolick was a lawyer for the Clinton administration who wrote the firewall memo. The firewall memo said that we could not transfer military intelligence to civilian law enforcement. The 2 of them ran the commission with a staffer named Dieter Snell. The commissioners had no clue. The commissioners were kept out of the picture. The commission document was done just to satisfy the people who were duped into believing that that was the ultimate answer of what occurred. When the commission report was issued, I went over to Lee Hamilton and Governor Keene, 2 good people. I said, "Lee, I was at 9/11. I was there at the base of tower when the building with the firefighters. We were looking for Ray Downey. His two sons are firefighters. I was with them. We didn't find Ray's body until 3 months later. I was there in '93. Why didn't you let me testify before the commission? He said, well, we didn't have time, Curt, to let you come in. I said, Lee, I was representing, they didn't want to hear. They didn't want the truth to be known of what occurred. And it gets worse than that. The American people, and I was at 9/11 on the day it happened. I was brought up by the fire department. I was at ground zero with the chief and with the line officers looking for firefighters. It was a total nightmare. And it was sickening. And I was there when George Bush got up on top and was waving his hand in the air saying, we're going to get you, bin Laden. We're going to get you and come after you. I really believed that that was our story. But because of my committee assignment back in Congress, I had access to all the classified intelligence. And because I couldn't trust the CIA to give me the right data about what the emerging threats were that I had seen in previous situations like the China situation, which I'll show you later, or other foreign policy debacles, I have my own intel team. There's a group in Washington called the Cockroaches. They're a group of people, primarily veterans, who work in the intelligence agencies. The CIA, the NSA, the DIA, and they meet for dinner once a month, socially. They're very loyal and patriotic. They don't allow politics to enter into the picture of assessing threats. My staffers were ex-veterans, and they were tied in with the Cockroaches, so I got to know them. So I said to them, can you give me raw data? Because I'm getting more information from defense reporters like Bill Gertz from the Washington Times, who comes to me for a story, and I said, Bill, where did you get that from? He said, well, I have this anonymous source. So I went to the Defense Department and the CIA, and I said, wait a minute. Am I getting a writer for the Washington Times, Bill Gertz, a great guy, very strong defense writer, why is he giving me information that I'm supposed to be getting from you directly as a member of the Armed Services Committee, the vice chairman? I said, you're giving it to them. You're leaking information because you want a preset agenda. So they wouldn't answer it, and that's what they continue to do this day. So I formed this task force, and I met with them in the members' dining room of the Capitol once a week, unofficially, and they fed me raw data. 3 months after 9/11, as I'm supporting the president with his decision to go over to get bin Laden in Afghanistan. And we're about to send troops to Afghanistan. My friends in this task force come to me and said, Mr. Chairman, bin Laden's been sighted in a town called Ladiz. I had no idea where Ladiz was. I went up to this bookstore up the street, and I bought this map. And I brought it back to my office, and I opened it up. I looked all over the map, all over Afghanistan. I couldn't find Ladiz. I looked all over the map in Pakistan next door. I couldn't find Ladiz. I found Ladiz. 10 kilometers inside the border of Iran. I went to the next meeting of the Armed Services Committee. Now, I'm the acting chairman. 60 members of Congress from both parties. I'm the chairman. CIA's in the witness table. It's closed, who says you're not open to the public. I said, I have information that Osama bin Laden has been sighted in Ladiz. What's your response? Well, Mr. Chairman, we've heard similar reports. We can either confirm or deny it. Now, we're sending American kids to Afghanistan, and the CIA is telling me that they can't deny the fact that he may be not in Afghanistan, but maybe in a country like Iran. I'm incensed, but I'm still believing our president, my party, my president. I was worried about our troops because when the Russians have been in Afghanistan, the Russian tribes took on the Russian military and caused harm. So I took a delegation over to Europe. The king of Afghanistan, Zahir Shah, was living in exile with his family. And I made arrangements to meet with him privately. 4 of us went over there. I have the photographs. We met with him in his brother's home. He was probably in his 70s. And I said, King Zahir Shah, we want to come into your country with our troops, but we don't want your tribal leaders to attack our troops. Will you go back to Kabul and convene what's called a Loya Jorga of all the tribal leaders and tell them to accept our troops and not to harm them? And he said, yes, I'll do that, Congressman. King Zahir Shah went back to Afghanistan. He convened all the tribal leaders as we began to send more and more troops to Afghanistan. And the fighting started to erupt there. 3 months after that, I get another request or another information session from my intel team. Mr. Chairman, we've got more information about bin Laden. He's being treated at a military hospital outside of Tehran in Iran. Outside of Tehran, Iran. I go back to the classified briefing. Again, there's no public allowed. 60 members of Congress from both parties. And I ask the question of the CIA. I have information that bin Laden is now being treated at a military hospital in Tehran. And their response was the same as the first. Mr. Chairman, we've had similar reports. We can either confirm or deny them. That was the second time that I now have questions about, is bin Laden really in Afghanistan, or are we sending our kids over there to fight and look for someone who's not there, and we know he's not there? Then a couple of strange things occur. And by the way, I will take a polygraph, as I said on Tucker Carlson's show. I've done 14 podcasts, 20 million views. And I've said publicly I'll take a polygraph, and I will on everything I'm telling you. A polygraph. I get a call from Jack Murtha, the most respected Democrat from Pennsylvania, from Pittsburgh, from a Marine, Chairman of Defense Appropriations. Jack sent Ron Klink over to my office. Ron was a KDK reporter from Pittsburgh who was in Congress from Pittsburgh. The two of them worked together. And Jack said, Curt, will you meet with Ron? He's got information about Iran. I said, sure, Jack, send him over. So Ron Klink comes in my office, and he brings a 6'3" guy with him. I don't know the man. It's a friend of Ron Klink's. Ron Klink's still alive. Murtha died, but Klink will verify the story. Ron Klink says to me, Curt, we need your help. I said, what's up, Ron? We've got information about Iran. I said, well, I'm very concerned about what's going on with Afghanistan right now. I said, no, this is more important. He said, my friend here wants to ask you to help him. He wants to go into Iran. So I listened to this guy. I said, what can I help you? What do you want? He said, well, Mr. Chairman, I was a knock. A knock is a non-official command employee of the CIA. The CIA employs thousands of people that they won't take responsibility for if they're caught. They're called knocks. They pay them, they give them benefits, but the understanding is you get caught doing what you're doing, you don't work for us. This guy was a knock. And he said, when I was working for the agency, I was assigned to work in Iran. And my friends in Iran are seeing bin Laden in Iran. And there's a $25 million reward for the arrest and capture of Osama bin Laden. If you help me get into Tehran, I'll leave my identity at the hotel, and I'll go out and I'll track him down and I'll bring him back dead or alive for the Americans to deal with. At the time, I was in a battle with the CIA. I said, I can't help you. I'm sorry. A month after that, I get a call from the Interior Department. The Department of Interior oversees all of our wildlands, our forests, and they want to bring in their top bird expert. Now, that wasn't unusual because I was on the Migratory Bird Commission. There's a federal agency in Washington which has 2 members of Congress, 2 senators, and 3 cabinet members that oversee the wildlife refuges nationwide. I was the Republican from the House. John Dingell was a Democrat. So I figured they want to bring this bird expert in to talk to me about birds. Birds like at wildlife refuges. So I said, okay, bring the person in. He brings in a guy from Maine, a U.S. citizen, who has 2 falcons on his shoulders. They have the blinders on their eyes. They're beautiful birds, $1 million birds. I'd never seen one up close. And he said, Congressman Weldon, I've devoted my whole life to falcons. He said, I come from a wealthy family. I helped the UN write the Falcon treaties. And I trained the children of the royal families in the Middle East on the sport of falconry. The sport of the Middle East royal families is to use falcons for hunting. And he said, I was the one that trained them and they trust me. I said, okay, that's nice. What do you want me to do to help you with the falcons? He said, I want you to help me go to Iran. I said, why do you want to go to Iran? My falconers are seeing bin Laden's birds flying in Iran. If you get me into Iran, we'll tag his birds and we'll take the U.S. to exactly where bin Laden is so the U.S. can capture him. That's the fourth verification that bin Laden is not in Afghanistan while we're sending kids to Afghanistan, 2,500 of whom come back in body bags. Then I get the two royal families. A member of the Kuwait royal family, the Al Sabah family, and the Saudi royal family. And I asked them, they're both friends of mine, as the time goes by, especially with the Kuwait, because I was the chairman of the Kuwait task force after Desert Storm. I said to Sheikh Saud Al Sabah, who was the ambassador, at a luncheon before he died, I said, Sheikh Saud, you know, we worked together. I helped your country. He said, you were the best. You brought the firefighters over to put our oil well fires out. I said, but you have to answer this question for me, Sheikh. Was bin Laden in Iran after 9/11? He said, of course he was. We knew he was there. The Saudi, the brother of the king of Saudi Arabia, said the same thing. In the end, I ended up with Michael Scheuer, who was career CIA, called me in my home, and he said, Congressman, you remember who I am? This was after I left Congress. I said, vaguely, Michael. He said, well, I was the CIA bin Laden Task Force Director for the CIA. And I met this Birdman that you've talked to. And they want to do a movie. They want to get you involved in it. Because I think, having worked for the CIA for 18 years, that he's right. They withheld information I should have had that I now see that bin Laden was actually in Iran, not in Afghanistan. I said, Michael, I'm not getting involved into what they did to my daughter and my son. I'm not getting involved. I hung up the phone. And about 6 months later, I get a call from General Tom McInerney at my home. He's still alive. He'll verify the story also. He says, Congressman Weldon, do you remember me? I said, yes, General, I remember you. He said, we need you to work with us on this film. I said, I'm not getting involved, General. What they did to my family is more important, and I don't know what else they're going to do. He said, but you've got to help. I said, I'm not going to get involved with the film. McInerney also believed that bin Laden was in Iran. And then the ultimate occurred. Probably 7, 8 years ago, I met a person from the Middle East who's worked for our agency for 50 years. He's not a U.S. citizen, but he's worked for our agency. In Bahrain, in the UAE, in Kuwait. He's been to my home here in America. I've met him over in the Middle East probably 15 times. And he said to me, you know, he calls me my dear, you know, my dear, you were right. I said, about what? He said, well, about a lot of things, but you were right about bin Laden. I said, what do you mean? He said, he was in Iran. I said, how do you know? He said, I was in the room when the deal was cut. I was acting on behalf of the U.S. to give the U.S. plausible deniability because I'm not a U.S. citizen. The deal was cut to place Osama bin Laden in Iran, while we sent American kids to fight and die in Afghanistan. Folks, this is not America. This is not what I spent my life teaching school about and spent my life working on to end up seeing this happen in front of me in the Congress of the United States. Now, when I first raised the issue of the intelligence and brought in the Army intelligence leaders that were willing to go public, Lieutenant Colonel Tony Schaefer, who I just did a program with earlier today. Tony spent 25 years in Army intelligence. Lieutenant Colonel Bronze Star recipient. Tony was in Afghanistan, and they brought him back to be on a special task force called Able Danger, that group that did that work. When 9/11 happened and all the deaths took place, Tony went back to his assignment in Afghanistan. So Zelikow, the director of the 9/11 Commission, took a team over to Afghanistan to interview military personnel to see if anyone knew anything about what had occurred before 9/11. They met in a city in Afghanistan. Tony went to his commanding officer and said, I was a part of a team, I should talk to Zelikow, and he did. Tony briefed Zelikow, they exchanged business cards. And Tony said, I was one of 20 military intelligence officers that worked this program that identified not only Al-Qaeda but Bin Laden, but identified Muhammad Atta as a part of the Bin Laden team in the U.S. a year before 9/11, and we were prevented from transferring the information 3 times to the Justice Department. And Zelikow said to Tony, when you get back to the States, I need to meet with you right away. Here's my business card, call me. When Tony Schaefer came back to the U.S., his office was shut and sealed. His security clearance was removed. They stripped him of his assignment. He was no longer a senior leader in Army intelligence. The DIA tried to destroy his life and his career. I defended him. I did a 1-hour special order, which you can still see in the House files, which are available online, calling it the biggest cover-up since Watergate. Tony Schaefer's life was destroyed because he tried to tell the truth. Tony then went to become a part of our Army Reserves. And he was going to write his book about a life of a spy. So he went to his commanding general as his protocol, and he said, can I get your permission, review the material, make sure there's nothing in here that's offensive, no secrets. His general reviewed the book. And the general said, it's okay, Tony, publish it. So Tony, publisher, started publishing the book, Operation Dark Heart. The deep state found out. They issued a cease and desist order to the publisher. It was too late. It was already being published. Our government, using your tax dollars, bought all 10,000 first edition copies of this book. All 10,000 copies, and destroyed them. I had Tony on a podcast a year ago. I said, Tony, you have the original book, right? The one that's not redacted? Yes. And you have the redacted book? Yes. What was so secret in that book that the deep state didn't want you to tell the American people? What secrets did you give away? And Tony said, they didn't like the fact that I had mentioned Zelikow's name in my book. They didn't want the American people to know that Zelikow had been briefed on the Able Danger information a year before 9/11. I'll take a polygraph. You can watch Tony Schaefer on TV. You've probably seen him. How many have seen Tony Schaefer on TV? Well, you've seen him speak. I'll give you 5 more intelligence officers that will say the same thing. Folks, we've been lied to. I'm not talking about the buildings coming down. I'm not an architect or an engineer. I'm talking about the intelligence. They lied to us and I witnessed it. Then on top of it, if you read the 9/11 Commission report, there's nothing about this guy in that report. This is a book you can buy. New York Times bestseller. Became a Hollywood movie called Horse Soldiers. If you buy it, go to page 27. The book's about General Keith Lambert. General Lambert was our Special Forces commander of our Special Forces that ride horses. In page 27, the interviewer asked General Lambert, what was your response, General, over in Asia when you heard about the 9/11 attack? And the general on page 27 says, within seconds, I knew who had done the attack. And I knew it involved Muhammad Atta. Because I had been briefed on a top secret Army intelligence program. None of that's in the 9/11 Commission report. None of it. The whole stinking story has been to suck the American people into believing a narrative that's totally false. Now they threatened me. In 2000, I have a letter from Donald Rumsfeld, which I can show you. It's on my website, endorsing me to become chairman of the Armed Services Committee. Donald Rumsfeld was George Bush's top guy. That same year, John Hamre, the top defense person for Bill Clinton, wrote a one-page letter endorsing me to become chairman of the Armed Services Committee. Two of the most powerful leaders in both parties endorsing me because I was aggressive. They knew I based it on facts. They knew I could deliver bipartisan support because the Democrats respected me. I'm a very bipartisan person. That was in 2000. In 2001, I challenged what happened. I challenged the narrative. I went to Rumsfeld and I said, Mr. Secretary, you're lying. This is wrong. I said, you've got to let these military intelligence people testify before the Congress so the American people can understand what they were doing. And Rumsfeld said, no way. Now, this is the guy that endorsed me to be chairman. No way. We're not going to let them testify. So I went to the members of Congress. I have a letter here. Copy of it's in my folder, signed by 250 members of Congress. That I got signatures. 250. Not Republicans, 250 members. Demanding that Rumsfeld let them testify. They still wouldn't let them testify. I raised holy hell for 5 years. I wrote a book, 2005, about Iran. And I said, the people of Iran are not our enemy. We should not be going to war with the people of Iran. You know who the book was endorsed by? Jim Woolsey. Jim Woolsey was CIA director. He endorsed my book with a 3-page letter. And so did Jack Caravelli. Jack Caravelli was Al Gore's CIA advisor. They both endorsed my book. When I took on the CIA, the front cover says, top secret information the CIA is ignoring. The CIA went wild. The Iranians published my book in Farsi. It became the most popular book among the Iranian people because I said, the Iranian people don't want war. Think for a moment, folks. When the Shah was in power in Iran, Iran was our best friend. Our intelligence people, Brennan and Clapper, trained the Iranian intelligence. They trained the IRG. We trained the Iranian intelligence. When the radical mullahs took over Iran, when the Ayatollah took over Iran, they didn't change their intelligence agency. They stayed the same. So when my friend that was in the room for the meeting, 6 years ago we killed someone, Donald Trump took credit for it. He said, we got this bad guy. Remember who it was? Soleimani. I text my friend, was it Soleimani? And he texts back within 5 seconds, yes. We cut the deal with Soleimani, and that's why we killed him. The deal was cut by our intel with Iranian intel. That's the problem, folks. I'm not afraid to say it. They kill me, they'll kill me. I'm at the end of my life anyway. I don't need money now. I don't need some contract to keep me going. I owe this to my kids. They knew I was going to become chairman of the committee. They couldn't stop me. So in October of 2006, I was up for my 11th election. We had a person that they sent up from Washington, and the person running his campaign was Clinton's scumbag friend who had been his national security advisor, Sandy Berger. He was running the campaign of my opponent. 3 weeks before my election, I get a call at 7 o'clock in the morning that FBI agents raided my daughter's house in Philadelphia. If you're a father and have kids, that's the worst call you can have, except death. My staff said, Curt, we don't know what's going on. The election is 3 weeks away, and they're at Karen's house in Philly. All the TV cameras are there. And they're filming them taking boxes out of her house. I couldn't believe it. I've got 5 kids. My oldest daughter would never do anything wrong. So I immediately said, I've got to make sure my daughter's okay. If she's done something wrong, I want to know about it and help her. That's more important than campaigning. The same day they raided my daughter's house, the same day, the agent sent from D.C. went to a lawyer in Broomall, Democrat lawyer named John Gallagher. He went to his Philadelphia office. They shut down Market Street. Helicopters overhead, dogs, the whole big spiel. They never bothered to check. They were in such a rush to get my election upended that John Gallagher, when they raided his law office, was an FBI counter intel against Russia that I had arranged for the FBI 2 years earlier. So the FBI counter intel people were in the office with John, sitting with him. And they said, Mr. Gallagher, you're doing work for the government. We don't know what's going on here. Don't answer any questions. And by the way, all this is on tape. John did an interview for me on tape. It's all protected. They can't erase it. So the intel agents come into his office. You've got 2 sets of agents in his office at one time. And John says, what do you people want? I have nothing to hide. Even though the counter intel people are telling John, don't answer any questions. He says to the people from D.C., the agents, what do you want? And their first question was, Mr. Gallagher, isn't it true that you're related to Congressman Curt Weldon? And John starts laughing at them. He said, you're kidding me. You're from the FBI. And you come into my office 3 weeks before the election with the counter intel people sitting here with me. And you ask the question, because my last name's Gallagher and his wife's maiden name is Gallagher, if we're related, and you haven't checked that out. I knew who told them that. I knew who told them that, and it's all documented. There's no relationship. It was a setup. They then apologized to John. And John said, what are you really here for? Because obviously he's no relative of mine. They wanted 2 files. The one file was about a liquor company in Moldova. The liquor company in Moldova, I don't know who the people were. It was John's clients because there are a lot of Russians living in Philly and John was representing them. Nothing to do with me. This is the file they wanted. Listen carefully. They want the file of Douglas Kent. Douglas Kent was our senior State Department officer in the Russian Far East, Vladivostok. Senior officer for the State Department. Douglas Kent got drunk in his personal car, which is against protocol, and ran this car into a car with a young Russian 20-year-old kid named Alexander Kashin. Almost killed the kid, caused him to become a quadriplegic. Kashin's family lived in Philadelphia. And they called their grandparents and their uncles and said, Alexander needs help. We don't know what we're going to do. The local folks in Philly went to Gallagher because they knew him. John took the case pro bono. Pro bono. They weren't asking for any money. They were asking for the boy to be rehabbed. The same thing you'd want if your child was hit by some federal employee drunk. John, because I was the congressman from Delaware County and I had done work in Russia, I helped John. I embarrassed the State Department because I wanted them to respond and help this kid get rehabilitation. We took him out to Elwyn to meet with the Elwyn people. The State Department would never even acknowledge anything. And by the way, this story is written up in the Washington Post. You can read it. You Google it. Well, Douglas Kent, it turns out, when he was hired by the State Department, wasn't just our State Department senior person. He was our top CIA officer in the Russian Far East. And when he was hired, he was the vice chairman of the American Nazi Party. And in his file, John has a photograph of him in a Nazi uniform. Now, you want to talk about everything is documented. It's not me saying something or accusing something. It's all documented. That's what's wrong with our country, folks. My family paid the price. My daughter was never talked to by anyone. No one ever talked to my daughter. No one called her in. No one brought her into a legal case. No one talked to her. They had done the damage long before Donald Trump. And our son died several years later. I won't go into the details because I don't need sympathy. So you understand why I have passion? When you have 2 of your 5 kids affected, you understand what it means. That's about my job. It's about what they'll do. I know what Donald Trump went through because I went through it before Donald Trump. Because I was doing the right thing for the country. Ray Downey died. The most poignant communication of any firefighter in New York was Chief Oriole Palmer. Chief Palmer was a battalion chief, 34 years old, 3 kids. We got a copy of the film you want to watch is Bravo 7. It wasn't put on by Hollywood. It's produced by firefighters. I'll give it to you for free. It's an hour and a half long. And you'll hear Ray, you'll hear Chief Oriole Palmer come on. He arrived in the first truck in the tower, loading his firefighters up with gear, 40 pounds of gear, inch and a half line on his shoulder, air packs on. They get in the elevator, 40 floors up. They get off the elevator and you hear him say, we're on the 40th floor, we're heading up. We're walking up the stair tower, 45th floor, we're okay. 50th floor, we're okay. 55th floor, we're okay, we're going up. We're going to get the people out. You hear him reach the 78th floor. The floor of impact where the plane hit. He gets out on the floor, and as clear as day as I'm talking to you now, Chief Oriole Palmer says, we're here on the floor of impact. We've got 2 fires, and we can handle them. And the building collapses 1 minute later. Now let me just say this to you. I'm not an architect, I'm not an engineer. I did spend 18 years of my life working for the largest insurance company in North America, INA, at their home office. My job was to train all their fire protection people nationwide to inspect buildings and properties. I will say this to you. There has never been a building in the world, a high-rise building, come down from a fire. Never. Not one. And there has never been a building in the world come down from a plane hitting it. Not one. I'm not making any claims about those buildings. I'm not an architect. But I'm telling you those facts. That's why what we need is a presidential commission. Not a commission of garbage, not a commission of bullshitters, a commission of people with integrity to look at the facts and tell us what really happened. Tell us the details that we don't know. Because right now, America, as we approach the 25th anniversary of the 9/11 attack, the biggest stain in our country is that 343 firefighters died, and they're my friends. I was up in New York City Fire Department 3 times last month with the deputy chief. The deputy chief of rescue for New York today is Joe Downey. Joe Downey is Ray Downey's son. He invited me to come up and meet with all the rescue officers. So I went up to Roosevelt Island. They had a special lunch they prepared for me. I brought Navy Admiral up with me. We sat there at lunch and I had them all tell their story. Every one of them had family members die at 9/11. I listened to them all. And as I got there, Joe said, Curt, it's so great to see you. He had his 25-year-old son there, Joe Jr. And Joe Jr. said to me, Mr. Weldon, it's great to see you again. Last time I saw you, I was 4 years old. You see, folks, when 9/11 happened, I brought Ray Downey, his widow, and his 5 kids down to Delaware County. 1 month after 9/11, I hired a luxury bus We drove them down and had parades from Springfield Mall and Granite Run Mall to you probably remember this, Dana, to Rose Tree Park. We had 40,000 people honor Ray Downey as an American hero. And that 4-year-old kid that was there is now a firefighter in New York with his father, who has his grandfather's job. To me, folks, this is all personal. Again, no one's paying me. I don't have any effort of backside benefit, but my country is in trouble right now. It's not just about 9/11. I can show you the charts. This started in the 90s under the Clintons. And look, I'm a bipartisan person. When the Democrat congresswoman from Indiana decided to write a book about bipartisanship last year, she contacted me. And she said, Jill Long, she said, Curt, will you write a chapter for the book? I'm only asking 12 members to do it, 6 Democrats and 6 Republicans. I wrote the chapter on public safety is not a partisan issue. I don't play politics with people's lives. I was in John Sununu's office. John Sununu was chief of staff to George Bush, the father. And I respected him. Large family from Cuba. He's in his 80s now. But back when I left Congress, I was in his office and he said, you know, Congressman, you were a great member. People really respected you. But you made one fundamental error. He said, when you come to this city, you're either on one rail or the other rail. And you went down the middle and took on both rails. I said, John, with all due respect, I didn't pledge allegiance to the Republican Party. You were ecstatic. You were ecstatic when I took on Sandy Berger. You were ecstatic when I took on the Clintons. But then when I saw the same thing occurring under Bush and with Cheney, then you didn't like it. I got to take a word about Cheney because I'm in Malvern. And you know, a year ago, Cheney's daughter was here. And I went public about it. And I got to talk to you about it because I want to put it on the record of what a scumbag Dick Cheney is. And I served with him. So let me tell you the story. I led delegations to 104 countries to avoid war. North Korea 3 times. Libya 4 times. I took Joe Biden to Libya on my 2nd trip. My first trip to Libya to meet Gaddafi was to support George Bush when George Bush came out and said that Gaddafi wanted to make sure we never had war between our 2 countries. And I took him up and said, that's a great thing. So I was taking members over to meet our troops in Iraq. And I said, we're going to stop in Libya on the way over, and we're going to reinforce to Gaddafi that he needs to do these good things with George Bush. Even though I despised what he had done with the Lockerbie bombing and the Bella nightclub bombing, and I confronted him with that. So we arrive in Libya, the first delegation of Americans in 25 years in Libya. We get off the plane, and the Libyans, hundreds of them, are all over the airport with flowers and music, welcoming the first Americans back to their country. And we got off the plane. Gaddafi wasn't there. We met him at the end. But they welcomed us with open arms. They showed us around the city, and they took us to this reservoir, man-made reservoir, where they had built a water system for the people, for drinking water and for sanitation in the middle of the desert. It was very impressive, and they had a luncheon for us under these tents. And while we're sitting there eating the lunch with these officials from Libya and the neighboring countries, we saw this 14-foot high concrete pipe, which was obviously how they piped the water in. And so I asked the question, you've been under sanctions for 25 years because of the things you did, the bombing of the Lockerbie plane. How did you build this pipe? And the Libyan representative said to me, well, Congressman, we didn't build the pipe, we bought it. I said, wait a minute. You've been under sanctions for 25 years. Did you buy the pipe from Russia? No. Well, you must have bought it from China. No. Well, who did you buy the pipe from? We bought it from Halliburton. The CEO of Halliburton at that time was Dick Cheney. So Dick Cheney, the CEO of Halliburton, sold the pipe to Libya while they were under sanctions, not having any regard for the requirements of our U.S. laws and regulations. Folks, the problem is not one party or the other, it's both parties. And unless you understand that you've got You've got to take control. I never met Donald Trump. I think they're afraid to let me meet with him because I know too much. But I would say this to you. I don't know what's going to happen if they take Donald Trump out. A year ago, I predicted that they would try to take him out because the deep state never wanted him. In fact, I told Rudy Giuliani, I met with him for dinner up at his favorite restaurant in New York back when Trump was going in the first time. And I said, Rudy, what they're going to do, the deep state doesn't want him. They're going to take away people that understand the deep state, and Trump will be like a baby in the woods. And that's what they did. They took away Mike Flynn. Mike Flynn's a friend of mine. Once they got Mike Flynn out, Donald Trump had no idea of what the deep state was doing. Nothing. And for 4 years, they wreaked havoc on our country. My concern today is that could happen again. I have nothing against J.D. Vance. I think he's a good guy, but he's not Donald Trump. No one has the stamina, the backbone, and most importantly, if you look at our presidents from Clinton to Bush Jr. to Obama to Biden, they all made money off of their job. Trump doesn't need to make any money off his job. And so he doesn't need them. All I can tell you is, in your efforts locally, when I was in Congress here, we had representatives in the suburban counties. They were all Republicans and independent. Now you've got 3 women who vote 100% with Nancy Pelosi. That's not what this region is. Nancy Pelosi could not win any of these districts, but she's your representative in Chester County. She's the representative in Delaware County and Montgomery County. That's not going to change unless you all take control and stop this stuff from happening. And all I can do is go out and speak what I know and give you facts that I will take a polygraph on. And I don't say anything that I won't take a polygraph on, because I witnessed it all firsthand. It's disgusting. And so what I would ask you to do in closing is, there are copies of this book here. Let your representative know that you want, or let the president know, you would like him to appoint a presidential commission, not a congressional commission, a presidential commission of integrity to investigate 9. I want to give you a closing that's going to shake you up. You know who's running for mayor of New York? Who is it? Yeah. Do you know what Mom Donnie's background is? Do you know what affiliation? Al-Qaeda. Google his father. So we're going to elect the mayor of New York who has ties to the group that destroyed New York 25 years ago. Are you kidding me? You understand, folks? Thank you.